If you're like me and you were playing a lot of first person shooters back in the early to mid 2000s, then you'll know that the first person shooter market was absolutely saturated with World War II shooters. And when I say saturated, I mean absolutely freaking saturated. Medal of Honor was one of the biggest shooter games at the time. It focused exclusively on the World War II theme, and they made over 10 World War II themed titles between 1999 and 2007. They had the first Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor Underground, Medal of Honor Allied Assault expansion packs for that game, Medal of Honor Frontline, Medal of Honor Infiltrator, Medal of Honor Rising Sun, Medal of Honor Pacific Assault, Medal of Honor European Assault, Medal of Honor Heroes, Medal of Honor Heroes 2, Medal of Honor Airborne, Medal of Honor Vanguard. All of those were World War II themes, and that's just Medal of Honor. I'm not counting Call of Duty, which people forget all of the Call of Duty games up until Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, I believe, were World War II themed games. Then we also had quite a few Brothers in Arms games. We had the first Sniper Elite come out in 2005, and of course Battlefield debuted, which exploded and became a huge success in 2002 with Battlefield 1942 and a whole bunch of expansion packs for it as well. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually leaving out quite a few big AAA World War II themed games. A lot of them went into the RTS theme as well in different genres other than just shooters. And then, of course, because there wasn't enough World War II themed games, the mod scene got on board, created Day of Defeat, an incredibly popular Half-Life mod, which Steam, or Valve rather, adopted later and turned it into a standalone title. And then we had Red Orchestra in 2006, which a lot of people know about now because they've continued on and continued making their own standalone games from that series. And so, just to paint a picture, if you were a big shooter fan back in these days, World War II was everywhere. You couldn't avoid it. It was basically the theme of all the major, or many of the major popular video games of the time. And what's crazy about this nearly decade-long obsession with World War II video games was that you can basically trace it all back to the film Saving Private Ryan, directed by Steven Spielberg, that came out in 1998 and visualized some very important battles of World War II. They visualized the D-Day landing scene. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's an incredibly well-known and popular film, but they did it with such fidelity and such high production quality and such a new take on realism, or showing war in a realistic portrayal, that almost every new war director started copying some of the cinematography styles that were used in that film later on. And right after that movie came out in 1999 was when the first Medal of Honor game launched, which I think was what really kicked off the massive craze. People saw that Medal of Honor 1999 on the PlayStation recreated that D-Day scene, basically just copying it from Saving Private Ryan. And since then, there's been, I don't know, 20, 30 different D-Day scenes recreated in video games, and they all basically copy that same Saving Private Ryan scene and that same beach assault. And so it's pretty easy to connect the dots from Saving Private Ryan to the first Medal of Honor game to every game that sort of sprung out of that inspiration, which is many and so many different branches, so many different directions. And then of course it was even further fueled by the incredibly popular Band of Brothers HBO series that Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg produced after Saving Private Ryan, which delved even further into many other battles of World War II. And again, in a sort of cyclical nature, further fueled more video games that really just started pulling from that material and recreating video game missions based around the battles that were displayed in those shows. And so it really did lead to about a decade's worth of World War II shooters until that eventually waned in popularity, and gamers were just sort of like, I just can't do another World War II shooter. They're all great. They're all really good. But there's only so much of something I feel like the gaming audience can really take all at once before it starts to die down. And they're like, all right, can we just get something else here? Something slightly different themed. And sure enough, modern military shooters started to take over, probably largely fueled by a lot of the conflicts that were happening in the Middle East at that time. And so we're getting a lot of Middle Eastern themed games and other things going on with modern military technology. Now in 2017 and 2018, the World War II shooter is trying to make a big comeback. We've not only got a huge amount of indie titles springing up and popping forward, trying to popularize the genre again, or trying to bank off the idea that World War II shooters are going to become very popular again, but also the AAA titles with Call of Duty making a full push at the World War II genre, and also rumors that the next Battlefield game may also return back to World War II. And so it's interesting from my perspective as a consumer who might want a variety of shooters to pick from. You know, maybe I want something modern, maybe I want something futuristic, something historical, to see so many of the big companies saying, you know what, let's do World War II. That's going to be the next big hot topic for whatever reason. Maybe they were banking on the new Christopher Nolan film to be hugely popular and popularize the war again or something like that. I'm talking about Dunkirk. But for whatever reason, a whole bunch of developers, indie and AAA, have gone back to World War II genre and are trying to just kind of bring it forward to the masses again, as if it's going to be another 10-year-long World War II shooter insanity that we had before. Personally, I don't think we're going to have that again, not without a massively popular film or something happening to really sort of put that war on everybody's mind again for quite a while. But I think we'll get a little bit of a blip of World War II content. And those games are going to be much more dependent on bringing something new and interesting to the gaming genre rather than just feeding off of the theme and cranking out kind of a standard game. And we're already kind of seeing the trend play out in the indie shooter world. We've got games like Days of War that was sort of a Day of Defeat clone. Then there's Battalion 1944, which was a Call of Duty competitive clone from the early 2000s. And really, by any sort of Steam charts measurement, both those games have really failed to grasp any sort of big audience or any sort of big interest in the game. I think they were both very much banking on the World War II theme, carrying their game a lot further, and really it didn't. And so the World War II theme itself is not strong enough in today's market to sell a game on its own, and they have to be backed up with incredible gameplay or really cool new interesting features that nobody's seen before. And there's a few milsim games out there that are bringing sort of that milsim approach to the World War II genre. We have Postscriptum, which was a mod for Squad, and then we also have Hell Let Loose, which is a very realistic looking milsim game. I just recently did a video on that one, and it's beautiful, and I'm quite excited to see where that one goes. Just from the aesthetics alone, the developers have done a very good job at creating a believable, realistic looking World War II game. So I think they've sort of found a niche there that might work out for them in terms of creating World War II as realistically as possible. That's something that none of the games in the past really did. They created visual realism, but the gameplay itself was very arcadey and action-packed and over-the-top. Creating games that try and, as realistically as possible, recreate World War II battles is something that nobody's really attempted before, or at least not in a major way. They've all been kind of had some sort of arcadey background to them to an extent. And so we'll see if this genre really takes off, but it's certainly not banking on the fact that World War II is the main selling point of the game, but rather that the milsim factor and the realism factor is the main selling point of the game. Ultimately, though, I think it's really interesting to look back on where the gaming market used to be in the early 2000s and how a single film could dominate like an entire genre of gaming for an incredibly long period of time. And I think that there were some sort of rumblings that there might be a new resurgence of World War II games, but I don't think it's going to happen without a massive film or something to really put the World War II theme in people's minds again. So we may be getting, the oddball World War II game here or there, and maybe devs will want to kind of coordinate and do a similar themed game like back-to-back a couple years in a row. But I don't think we're going to be seeing a massive resurgence of World War II themed titles. I think we're in a much more interesting, eclectic era of gaming, especially for first-person shooters, where we've got battle royales, we've got weird pseudo-futuristic shooters, we've got historical shooters, we've got modern day shooters, we've got milsim shooters. There's plenty of things to choose from now, and I think it's going to stay that way. But it is interesting anyway to sort of notice the market trends and see what's going on and kind of predict what we're going to see in the future. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video interesting. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.